The morning light poured through the sheer curtains of Madame Alira's grand estate, stretching across marble floors and brushing against the freshly polished silver that lined her table. And there I was, the servant with trembling hands and a heart that betrayed my place every time she looked my way. Her gaze always calm, yet burning deeper than the heat of the hearth as I swept the floors and dusted her books and carried trays of fruits. I felt her watching silently from her study, her presence, too loud to ignore and too dangerous to name. She walked past me in silken robes that kissed the floor, her scent blooming around her like forbidden spring, and I would lower my head, but my body would burn in protest, knowing she was the son I was, not allowed to touch, and yet when she spoke my name, it was never with distance. No. It rolled off her lips like a secret whispered in the dark. I remember the first time her fingers grazed mine. It was over a teacup I served at just the right temperature. Her hand lingered over mine, not enough to scandalize, but enough to make my breath catch. And I saw it then, the crack in the porcelain wall between us, the one she had built, and the one I was too afraid to break, and from that moment I knew I was not just a servant anymore. I was something else in her eyes, a creature of potential, a man made of fire. She was willing to touch. She began to summon me at dusk when the estate quieted and the rest of the staff had retired. She'd call for wine, or for her cloak, or for music. And always only me. No one else allowed near her chambers. And I would come heart-pounding, the weight of rules pressing against the heat rising inside me. And in those moments, silence would stretch thick and heavy between us until she would speak in a voice low and velvet, telling me to sit or to come closer or simply to stay. One night she asked if I ever dreamed of more, and I couldn't lie. Not to her. Not when her fingers brushed against my jaw and her eyes searched mine. And so I nodded once, and that was all it took. She stepped into me and pressed her lips to mine, soft at first, then with the hunger of a woman who had waited too long, and I responded not as a servant but as a man desperate to taste the one thing he was never supposed to have. That night the air was heavy with our unspoken truths. The fire roared as clothes slipped from bodies and titles disappeared until there was only skin against skin, heat against heat, breath on breath. Her voice, trembling against my throat as she whispered my name, not as a command but as a plea, as a prayer, as if I was the only thing she needed. We moved together like a secret only the stars could witness, the night swallowing our moans and sighs as her body arched beneath mine. And I gave her everything I had, all the reverence, all the hunger, all the love I'd buried under my uniform. And when morning came, she didn't dismiss me. Instead, she held me, her hand in my hair, her body tangled with mine. And in that moment, I knew the line had been crossed, and I would never go back. I was still her servant by day, but by night I was hers completely, her equal, her lover, her obsession. The days grew longer, but it was the nights that kept us breathless, that stole our sanity and stitched our hearts together in a rhythm too dangerous to name. I would polish her mirrors, arrange her gowns, pour her tea, and all the while, her fingers would brush mine in passing, her eyes would find mine across rooms crowded with rules and expectation, and though no one spoke of it, everyone felt it. The change in the air, the way she lingered near, the way I stood taller when she entered. Each night was a ritual carved from want. I would wait outside her chamber until her voice called me in, soft as smoke, and each time it was different. Sometimes she wore lace, sometimes nothing at all, and I would step inside as a man, shedding every chain she or the world had placed on me. She would approach slow like a storm with lightning in her eyes and thunder in her breath, and when her hands touched my chest I would shudder, not because of fear, but because of the way she unmade me without even trying. Her lips would find my neck, my shoulder, my soul, and I would respond with hands desperate and knowing, tracing every inch of her as if I was trying to memorize the taste of heaven before it disappeared. We never rushed our hunger. We let it bloom, slow and consuming, her breath always quickening as my mouth found her secrets, her sighs rising as my hands claimed the curve of her waist, the softness of her thighs, and the fire that burned between them. She would arch against me, her nails pressing into my back as if to say, "Stay. Don't vanish. Don't fade." And I would hold her tighter, whispering her name again and again, until it no longer sounded like a title, but a promise carved into skin. There were nights she wept after the climax when Our bodies lay tangled in moonlight when the world crept back in with whispers of what we weren't allowed to be, and I would kiss every tear from her cheek, every fear from her breath until her lips found mine again. Not with sorrow, but with fire, with hunger, with that same need that had pulled us together again and again. We became rhythm and pulse, sweat and breath. Her legs around my waist, her voice crying out as I filled her with every ounce of my devotion, and every time I reached for her, I did so not as a man in love with his mistress, but as a soul who had found its twin and would never let go in the quiet after our storm. She would trace lines on my chest, speaking dreams she never told anyone else. I would listen and hold her. And sometimes she would ask what would happen if the world found out, and I would answer, with lips pressed to her temple, I don't care, because the world had no place in our bed, no voice in our love, no power over what we created in secret. And so, every morning I returned to my duties, shoulders square, head down, heart thundering, and every night I returned to her body, to her touch, to the heat we had made between stolen moments and whispered oaths. I was her servant by day. Yes, but by night, I was the man who loved her in every way a man could, and she was mine forever, in shadows and in light, in silence and in moans, in each breath she gave, and every part of herself she offered to me, I was hers.